A call for an emergency protest went out in Toronto in light of Israel's maniacal bombardment of Gaza. Thousands showed up. Have a look. Israel killed 432 Palestinians. 147 of them were children. But if Zionists in Toronto get their way, people won't be able to protest this genocide much longer. The city of Toronto is currently conducting consultations on a very controversial policy that puts our Charter of Rights and Freedoms at risk, specifically Section 2C. This is the section which gives us the right to participate in peaceful demonstrations, protests, parades, meetings, assemblies, and picket lines. The consultations are on a policy that would see protests made illegal against what the city of Toronto is calling vulnerable institutions. Examples of vulnerable institutions are faith-based schools, places of worship, recreational areas, etc. City of Toronto is now asking residents to fill out a survey, and the survey is in dozens of languages, reflective of our beautiful city. Here's an example of one of the survey questions. Overall, how do you feel when you come across a demonstration in Toronto? Here are some of the options that you can check off. Appreciative, scared. I can't get to where I want to go. I fear for my safety. I am engaged. I feel uncomfortable. I've lived in this city for 46 years. I've never had such a consultation happen. So what's really driving this? I mean, where did this come from? Toronto never had a problem with protests before. My own community, the Iranian community, protested once a week for more than a year. We caused congestion. We took over sidewalks. We made human chains. We released smoke bombs. We chanted with megaphones and loudspeakers. What's really going on here is the Palestine exception on full display. What's really going on is people who support Israel's genocide don't want to be uncomfortable when they do it. They don't want to be confronted with what they're actually supporting. And it's all born out of the protests against Israel's genocide. Toronto organizers in particular have been very effective at organizing. This includes Jewish organizations and Palestinian organizations working together to try and get an arms embargo, to try and stop the onslaught in Gaza and call for the occupation to end. But there's one major event that I want to point to, and this is where the whole vulnerable institutions part comes into play. This event. Play the tape.
Finally. What else is happening in here? A real estate convention. Selling homes in illegal settlements, for example, in...
That was footage from a protest that I took held back in March 2024. Protesters were across from a synagogue in a suburb of Toronto called Vaughan. People were protesting there because there was a real estate bonanza happening inside the synagogue. Realtors, mortgage brokers, lawyers, all congregating and clamoring to sell property in the occupied Palestinian territories. These are illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. The poster for the event was just as atrocious and egregious. And I want to read this for you. It actually reads, "In all the best Anglo neighborhoods in Israel." Anglo neighborhoods. Why don't you just say for whites only and call it a day? That's right. Zionists use this so-called sacred space as a place for them to sell stolen land. This is all totally illegal under international law. And it was well covered, I remember, in the mainstream media. Naturally, people came to protest the sale of this land during Israel's genocide. However, those protests were painted as being, quote, anti-Semitic because they took place across from the synagogue. And while I was there that day, I interviewed Rabbi David Mivasir from Independent Jewish Voices, and he made a very interesting analogy when I asked him about people categorizing the protest as being anti-Semitic. Have a listen.
The synagogue's not being used as a synagogue, right? If the synagogue was selling stolen cars in its parking lot, right? The synagogue gets 100 stolen cars and sells them, and people objected to the synagogue selling stolen cars. Would that be anti-Semitic? I don't think so. It's not functioning as a synagogue. It's functioning as like a business site for selling stolen land. We're not objecting to people praying there. We're not objecting to people studying Torah there. We're not objecting to anybody being Jewish. We're objecting to them selling properties on stolen Palestinian land. That's what it is.
Do you see the idiotic hamster wheel that we're all just rolling in? On December 17th and 18th, 2024, Toronto City Council adopted the following decision. Now listen closely here, okay? Because I'm quoting. City Council directs the city manager, in consultation with the city solicitor, applicable city divisions, the Toronto Police Service, and other applicable stakeholders, to report to City Council in the first quarter of 2025, which is right where we are right now, informed by public consultations and a constitutional legal expert opinion on the charter rights implications, with a proposed bylaw with an emphasis on protecting vulnerable institutions such as places of worship, faith-based schools, and cultural institutions that supports the City of Toronto's commitment to keeping Torontonians safe from hate and protect charter rights that addresses impact of demonstrations that target people based on their identity as prohibited under the Ontario Human Rights Code. Do you know what all of that is? That means that the City of Toronto has stakeholders who want to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, who want to conflate protests against Israel with anti-Semitism. That's what that means. On February 6th and 7th, the city manager was ordered to come up with a framework, so this is just a month and a half ago, to monitor rallies and make sure that they are in alignment with the city's human rights and anti-harassment policy. So now the city wants to hear from you. You have until May 1st to write to your mayor, Olivia Chow, to your city councillors, whoever they may be, to tell them what you think of this attempt at stifling our right to freedom of expression and assembly. Please keep in mind, the only reason we are having this public consultation and conversation is because Zionists in this city want to see an end to demonstrations against Israel's slow drip genocide inside Gaza. Full stop. There is no other reason for these consultations to be happening. I have linked to the City of Toronto survey below. Please tell the city what you think of this egregious infliction on our rights to protest. Please share it widely. This is foreign interference, and it cannot come to pass.